space travel, it's an amazing thing because not only is it a sign of human ingenuity, which after all, it is, isn't it? It's also us wanting to explore the big, beautiful, majestic, divine cosmos. And somehow, both of those things give glory to God, that there is a world for us to discover out there, and that we have the ability to discover it. Hi, everybody. It's great to be with you. This is Michael Millerman from MillermanSchool.com. Today, we're going to be looking at an article about the tech right and the Trump administration. It's a theme we've covered on this channel before, and it's an extremely interesting and important topic. I don't know how closely you've been following all of these things, but take even something like yesterday, I think it was now, where Trump launched the Trump meme coin, which, took off and made a bunch of people millionaires. It's kind of weird and unthinkable almost that you'd have something like that happen on the weekend before his inauguration. Trump launches, even the whole phenomenon of meme coins, you might think is completely bizarre. You may even have no idea what that is. So it shows you that there's some new, it's one of the many things that shows you that there's some new component or some new element to this Trump administration, like something that would be helpful to know and to understand, whether because you're just trying to make sense of weird financial speculation that's taking place, like what is Solana? What is a meme coin? How is this generating revenue at all? What does it mean that there's a crypto czar in the new administration? What is crypto? How do we make sense of, many of you will already know these things, but some people won't. Like my father, who's sad to say, passed away over the holidays. He was a Trump supporter. He's interested in the Trump movement, and you could say kind of like an old school mentality on these things, but no idea what a meme coin is, no idea what these new technologies are. Just watching it from the outside as a layman who supports Trump. But now we have to begin to understand in a more sophisticated way, what is this tech dimension of the Trump administration, not just the crypto side of it, but other examples like companies such as Palantir, Anduril. Okay. And I think there are others that you're going to learn about, some publicly traded, some still privately held, that are staffed with people who are close to the Trump administration, who are supporters of the Trump administration, who are sort of in the network of tech right industrialists, inventors, entrepreneurs, financiers, and so on, who see a crucial shift taking place in the economy, in the zeitgeist, and in the culture in and around Trump. Okay, JD Vance, Peter Thiel, Alex Karp, Mark Andreessen. These are some people that you may have seen recently do prominent interviews. For example, Mark Andreessen was on the podcast circuit. You may have heard him on Joe Rogan. He spoke with Jordan Peterson recently. Alex Karp has this great book. I have it downstairs. I wish I had it here to show you. The Technological Republic, coming out in February. I got an early copy. Strongly recommend that you either read that book, The Technological Republic, or watch some interviews that Alex Karp has given about it. We covered Peter Thiel and JD Vance, as well as Curtis Yarvin, who was interviewed today in the New York Times. We've covered them on this channel previously. So this is kind of the world that I'm trying to help you to begin to understand, just pointing you to certain resources, certain topics, themes, authors. Like I mentioned, the Technological Republic book, probably have to cover in a separate video. So in this video, we're looking at something that came out today. This is a guest essay in the New York Times, published today, Saturday, January 18th, 2025. How long can the alliance between tech titans and the MAGA Faithful last? So I would like us to take a look at that together, by James Pogue. Mr. Pogue is a contributing opinion writer who covers the tech world and the new right. Just quickly before we turn to that article, you may even have seen some tension between these two factions. And in fact, before Trump was, before he was the president-elect, we had discussed here together on this channel that one of the new tensions perhaps in a Trump administration would be between the tech right and the trad right. Kind of a tension between those who believe that America's salvation requires a certain kind of technological optimism and those who are predisposed for other, perhaps more religious, more spiritual, theological reasons to consider an overzealous attachment to the salvific power of technology to be akin to a kind of, it's like being overly tech oriented is the way of the Antichrist. Being overly tech oriented is the way of the great deceiver. And technology, so far from being our great liberator, is going to be the cause of our great demise. So those are two sorts of tensions. But even if we take it out of the realm of the metaphysical, theological, spiritual, and even philosophical, there were more kind of lower level cultural and economic issues that played themselves out in the immigration visa debate, which many of you perhaps followed as that was taking place in real time. Vivek, for example, took his position in that debate, and many of the MAGA faithful were really opposed to the position that he took. So you could say, it's in the interests of the tech right to have all kinds of immigration. If it's high caliber immigration, provided that we're attracting the best and the brightest of the world's talent into America to help build our great companies. And then the MAGA faithful right says, well, wait a second, why are you using these H-1B visas? Why are you using foreign labor? Not to import, Manhattan Project style, top of the top IQ, greatest possible scientists, but, for $30, $40, $50,000 a year jobs, $60, $70, $80,000 a year jobs, positions that could go to Americans, to local Americans, to the people who need jobs. Why are you importing foreign labor? Maybe it's just for the sake of your bottom line. So that H-1B visa immigration debate started to show some potential rifts on the economic and cultural level between the interests of tech companies who do not see their primary, or to the extent to which they do not see their primary goals as a kind of national, a certain form of national prosperity, but their own bottom line. This was the accusation. And the MAGA faithful, who, from the other point of view, they want the local workers, but what about actually bringing in the top talent from around the world? Where do you strike the right balance there between the competition for human resources globally when it comes to building these companies? And how can you sort of find that in the right way? So I'll give you another little just data point, okay? Another little example. You can dig into it on your own to try to make heads or tails of it. But, there's this company, Anduril. Many of you may have heard about it before. Some of you will be hearing about it for the first time. I heard about Anduril for the first time when I was flying to El Salvador to give my talk on Plato's Laws. And I had pulled up, like I often do, just a bunch of random articles to read on the flight. One of the articles that I pulled up to read was in Tablet Magazine, Tablet Mag. I think tabletmag.com is the site. And it was a profile of the company's founder, Palmer Luckey. So I had never heard of this person before. I didn't know any of the backstory. Apparently, he's the founder of Oculus Prime virtual reality headsets. Then he had a falling out at Facebook under the old administration, because he donated to Trump, something like that. So he gave a $900 or some relatively small, relatively insignificant donation to Trump. But because of the political censorship at big tech against Trump, he was booted out of Facebook, something like this, okay? And he's a character, all right? So that's what I kind of like about these new philosophically inclined pro-Trump tech bros who are in and around the administration, that they're all a little bit eccentric. Alex Karp is a nice example of this in one of the recent interviews that I was listening to him give about the book, The Technological Republic. He's open about the fact that he was dyslexic and that he's sort of attracting around him, not other people who are dyslexic, but people who are eccentric in that they're extremely capable in a small number of things, and they can be, wildly dysfunctional in some other aspects of their lives. But to the extent to which they're extremely capable on some metric or in some dimension or concerning some question, and by extremely capable, I mean like artistic, creative geniuses, okay? The kinds of people that the kinds of people for the sake of which disciplines exist in the first place, for their greatest exemplars. So Palantir, Alex Karp is the CEO of Palantir. He was explaining how he tries to attract such people into the company, and they're building that kind of culture. So they're weirdos in a way, eccentrics in a way, but eccentric, artistic, creative, tortured madmen, geniuses who have something to show, not only for their madness, but in particular for their genius or for their talent and creativity. So this Palmer Luckey at Anduril, he was presented in this Tablet Mag profile as somebody like that, okay? Not somebody who went through your typical, well-paved path, got all the credentials in the right way. Sometimes Peter Thiel talks about this aspect of his own history. You got really good grades at this stage so that you can go to Stanford Law, so that you can graduate at the top of Stanford Law, so you can go to the best law firm, and da-da-da-da-da, right? A path that's neatly laid out for you. A lot of these guys, they had something like that and then soured on it, like Peter Thiel, for instance, or they just avoided that whole world altogether, like Palmer Luckey. So if you get a chance, read that profile. But Anduril, they just announced in the last couple of days, they're building $1 billion manufacturing plant in Ohio. And in this interview that I was watching, I think it was on Bloomberg TV, Palmer Luckey was mentioning that they're going to be bringing in X amount of outside laborers into Ohio. So he said in this previous location, the mix was like 80% outsiders and 20%, local population, I guess. And he said that in the Ohio factory, it's going to be some other split. It's not going to be as high as 80. And it also wasn't clear from that interview whether he meant they're going to be people just from outside of Ohio or whether they're going to be, outside of the country, are going to be brought in from outside of the country. So that was one place, the H-1B visa immigration visa debate, where you saw potential split between the MAGA right and the tech right. I understand there are other signs. There maybe even something comes up in this article. Somebody had said to me recently that Steve Bannon, whom we've discussed on this channel before, has really been hitting Musk hard. Now, I haven't seen that. I haven't followed it. I haven't been tracking that particular dispute. Again, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it comes up. The reason I think it comes up in this essay is because the URL, nytimes.com, 2025, January 18th, opinion, and the rest of the URL is Donald Trump Tech Musk Bannon.html. So that's why I assume that the Musk Bannon debate will be a part of this piece. So with all of those preliminaries out of the way, let's just go through it. I used to do these article readings on a live stream, and we'll get back to doing that soon. As I mentioned to you, I've been a little bit out of the rhythm, in part because of the death in the family, but let's not dwell. Let's not make excuses. Let's just read the article. So how long can the alliance between tech titans and the MAGA faithful last? Here we go. On Sunday evening, the night before Donald Trump's second inauguration, scores of luminaries from across the new right are expected to gather for a dinner and gala called the Coronation Ball at the Watergate Hotel. Okay, so in other words, tomorrow. The event is being hosted by the young right-wing publishing house Passage Press, known for publishing the neo-reactionary writer Curtis Yarvin, one of the earliest of those luminaries, most famous for advocating a monarchy run like a startup. So let me just pause here. Passage Press, okay, you should look into them. They publish Curtis Yarvin. They publish a bunch of other authors. They do good work. You should take a look at what they're doing, Passage Press. Today, this upstart coalition of thinkers may be best described simply as the intellectual wing of Trumpism. Celebrate the inauguration of Donald J. Trump, the publishing house announced, with the people and organizations that will shape the culture in his second term. The ball, meaning, again, okay, this coronation ball at the Watergate Hotel to be held Sunday, January 19th, put on by Passage Press, will celebrate more than the re-coronation of a president. It seems intended to mark the ascent of a new counter-elite with aspirations to supplant the existing establishment in everything from high politics to business and culture. But this is a loose alliance colored by rivalries and complex divisions. It has brought together people who previously had little in common. Word had it that Mark Andreessen, the billionaire venture capitalist, would be at the ball. Steve Bannon, avowed enemy of the Silicon Valley billionaire class, was to be a keynote speaker. Many guests were a bit nervy about outfits and expectations. They would also be navigating these fissures within Mr. Trump's coalition. Mr. Andreessen and Mr. Bannon stand on either side of the biggest of these divides, and the one presenting the greatest challenge for Mr. Trump's governing project. It's a gap in worldviews that went overlooked in the heady days of the campaign. When Elon Musk endorsed Mr. Trump putting a great deal of personal money and energy into the project of MAGA populism, he joined figures like the venture capitalist and podcaster David Sachs and the crypto exchange founder Tyler Winklevoss in what represents one of the most surprising and disruptive alliances in American political history. Tech emerged as an alternate power center to the Republican establishment. Silicon Valley money filled in for dollars lost from the traditional donor class. As the presidential transition took shape, tech figures stepped in to supply elite human capital, as they put it, to staff the new administration. All the biggest tech companies made sure to offer $1 million tribute to help fund the inauguration. I'll just pause here quickly. If this side of the story is new to you, please check out the other videos that I have on this channel about Trump and the tech right. Okay, all of that. We covered several different videos in the run up to the election. We made several different videos on a bunch of different articles outlining this theme. Okay, the core of the aspiring Trumpian aristocracy are still reactionaries and nationalists aching to restore an American way of life thought to be lost after decades of globalist technocracy. They are often deeply skeptical of the idea that the innovations promised by tech companies represent progress. And they describe America as not just a country, not just an economy, but a people with a common history. As Jeremy Carl, a Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Interior in the first Trump administration, and a senior fellow at the Claremont Institute, told me, the author writes. The tech figures who came to the movement in 2024 were often sympathetic to Trumpian nationalism, but they tended to be more interested in making money and launching a new era of American dynamism. Over Christmas, a bilious debate over the federal H-1B visa program, which brings in approximately 85,000 foreign workers, most of them Indian and most of them working in tech, unfolded on Mr. Musk's X. It first erupted on December 23 after Mr. Trump appointed an Indian-born venture capitalist named Sriram Krishnan to work with Mr. Sachs, who is said to be the administration's crypto and AI czar. The MAGA influencer, Laura Loomer, quickly found a post in which Mr. Krishnan had called for removing caps on how many green cards can be awarded to applicants from individual countries and for expanding skilled immigration. In a separate post on X, Ms. Loomer described it as an effort to welcome third world invaders from India, said our country was built by white Europeans, and mocked Indians as defecating in the water they bathe and drink from. Mr. Sachs came out to defend Mr. Krishnan, and the fight spiraled over Christmas. By early January, it had started to look like an epochal battle within America's new ruling coalition. Mr. Musk, whose companies benefited from the visa program, initially threatened to go to war on the subject, the likes of which you cannot possibly comprehend. But he seemed shaken by the backlash from the MAGA base. Thousands upon thousands of erstwhile fans were rising up online to denounce him as a traitor or a globalist, more concerned with his profit margins than the fate of the nation. The trouble between the two camps will now be an unavoidable undertone at the inauguration. Be there, Passage Press teased online for its inauguration event, as MAGA meets the tech right. The debate has genuinely high stakes heading in the first days of a wildly ambitious presidential administration. People like Mr. Bannon see the tech right almost as an existential enemy to the natural human order they want to restore. More moderate allies on the MAGA side just hope to keep things calm and friendly. If a true conflict emerges, Mr. Trump himself might well end up siding with the part of the coalition that offers vast supplies of cash and new friends socializing and scheming with him down at Mar-a-Lago. The coalition is achingly close to achieving a long-held conservative dream of fashioning a high-low alliance powerful enough to supplant the liberal establishment and remake America. It is a project that might well collapse if one side or the other gets too much of what it wants and ends up driving the other away. So there's a new sense of gravity when you talk to people who want to hold the coalition together. In 2017, the rough equivalent of the Coronation ball had been the gaudy deplorable. Now people would be wearing black tie. Before we were the outsiders looking in, and now we're walking in the front door, the podcaster Jack Posobiec told Politico, because this is a regime change. Okay, pause for a minute. So nice article so far, setting the stage, discusses the H-1B visa. Topic that we gave here in the preliminary remarks. I just want to say very quickly, okay? As we continue to go through the article and as you yourselves continue to think about the tension between these two factions and what's desirable, are they really factions? What's the middle ground and all the rest of it? There's one book that I have always liked that I teach in my school and that not everybody has heard of. Most of you know Plato, most of you know Aristotle, many of you know Nietzsche, Heidegger. These names are more or less familiar to. There's one author, Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik, an Orthodox Jew, who has a book called The Lonely Man of Faith. Nice short little book. You don't have to get my course on it. You can just read the book or just take my word for what it contains in a minute. What I really like about it, which you don't find, in all of these authors, they all go deeply into some fundamental questions. That's true. There's no doubt about that. You should read all of these people: Plato, Aristotle, Nietzsche, Heidegger, Leo Strauss, Carl Schmitt, Alexander Dugin. You can never read too much of these authors because you're always going to get profound insights into the human condition, into the nature of political life, and as it happens, into all kinds of contemporary debates as well. But what's nice about this book by Joseph B. Soloveitchik is he argues that there are two fundamental drives, you could say, in the human soul, each of which is divinely sanctioned, each of which is legitimated in the Bible, the authoritative text for him in the Old Testament or Hebrew Bible, in particular in the creation stories of Genesis, the two creation stories at the start of the Bible. There are two, okay, in Genesis. And the idea is that these two elements or aspects or dimensions, drives and tendencies in the human soul, they're not perfectly reconcilable. It's not that he says, they can be so easily harmonized that you're never going to have any problem and kumbaya, we can go on living forevermore in eternal peace and harmony. No. But we distort the human reality if we overly suppress one or the other of these dimensions. And for whatever reason, I find that to be a helpful lens when looking out onto the tech right and the MAGA right. And the two elements are, on one hand, doesn't map perfectly, okay, but I find it to be sort of helpful in thinking this question through. The two elements are, on one hand, our drive for technological discovery, conquest, innovation, enterprise, represented for Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik, first and foremost in space travel. Okay, so you've got SpaceX as a perfect example. Space travel, it's an amazing thing because not only is it a sign of human ingenuity, which after all, it is, isn't it? It's also us wanting to explore the big, beautiful, majestic, divine cosmos. And somehow both of those things give glory to God, that there is a world for us to discover out there and that we have the ability to discover it. Not completely, but increasingly. And that's truly amazing. The problem, though, for Rabbi Soloveitchik is that when this majestic scientific impulse, when it completely crowds out this other dimension, the dimension of sort of interiority, inner salvation, faithfulness, redemption, prayer, and that kind of community. Now, I don't say it's exactly the same, but maybe it's like, Mary and Martha in the story in the New Testament. Maybe it's like action versus thought or action versus contemplation, activity and passivity. Maybe there are all of these different sorts of divisions and distinctions that you could lay on top of this. But the way that Soloveitchik puts it is kind of like what I said. He gives due place, due regard. He has due regard for our for our desire to try to understand the world through engineering, through experimentation, through conquest, and to take pride in that. And again, to have it be to the glory of man and to the glory of God, which I think that is true. I mean, I personally am uncomfortable with the notion that we're going to denigrate human scientific discovery and achievement for those two reasons. It shows us a capacity that we have And it shows us a character that the world has. And both of those things seem to me to be praiseworthy. And at the same time, it's obvious that you can blow that so far out of proportion that you risk the dystopian tech world or the post-humanist or transhumanist vision where you've somehow left something vital behind. And what you've left behind seems to be akin to like this inner world. And maybe it's not just an inner world, because for Soloveitchik, the people who experience that inner world, they end up forming a community, again, a community of the faithful, something like that. So in some way, the MAGA faithful and the tech right, again, can be mapped onto that division. And to repeat, the goal is not a perfect harmonization, which according to Rabbi Soloveitchik is not really possible. But it's also not a total rift. It's not a civil war. It's not an attempt to dominate or to erase the other. It's just somehow these two things have to be kept in, they have to both be kept in play. And so I personally find that the presence of these two elements in the current administration, the tech right and the somehow, I'll call it the tech optimists and the tech pessimists, or, the ones who see man's splendor in American dynamism, and the ones who, are in some other way the community of the not primarily technologically faithful. So it's definitely a real tension, and it's not self-evident how to resolve it, even the best way of characterizing it. But again, I've always liked that Soloveitchik book. I taught it even before there were these rifts in the Trump administration, and I find it to be a useful way of thinking about that. So let's just go back to the article. I hope you don't mind that aside. You can always skip ahead or skip back, play this however you like to watch these videos. Earlier this month, Breitbart published an article that seemed calculated to make the dissonance between MAGA and the tech right into a real and perhaps irreconcilable split. It included translated snippets of an interview in the Italian daily Corriere della Sera, in which Mr. Bannon, who retains a huge amount of influence in both the incoming Trump administration and the wider MAGA sphere, presents himself as an uncompromising chief of the nationalist-populist core of Trumpism. In the article, Mr. Bannon, quote unquote, declared war on Mr. Musk and by extension the whole set of tech barons who had gained such influence in the Trump sphere. Okay, so let me just tell you that there's a link to that article. I haven't read it, and I will read it, and you should read it as well. You just go to this New York Times article and click on that link. Breitbart published an article that seems designed to put a split between these two factions, probably worth reading. Okay, in the article, to repeat, Mr. Bannon declared war on Mr. Musk and by extension the whole set of tech barons who had gained such influence in the Trump sphere. I will have Elon Musk run out of here by Inauguration Day, he said, calling him a truly evil guy. Before, because he put money in, I was prepared to tolerate it. I'm not prepared to tolerate it anymore. This challenge was widely seen as a new cycle in the H-1B visa wars, but when I called him, the author writes, Mr. Bannon articulated a very different and bigger reason for his challenge. I asked him if he saw the same deep-level philosophical tension I did. A tension, he asked, I would almost argue it's an unbridgeable gap. He named a roster of major figures on the tech right, whom he saw as enemies, Mr. Andreessen, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, the neo-monarchist writer Mr. Yarvin, and Balaji Srinivasan, an investor and technologist who promotes the idea of network states, new countries run on blockchain. Mr. Bannon accused the tech barons of promoting techno-feudalism and transhumanism, bending human life into technologized and unnatural new forms. This thing is all tied together, he said. They have a very well thought through philosophy and a very well thought through set of ideas, and they're trying to implement that. And to me, everybody's afraid, everybody's scared because of their power. I'm a populist nationalist, and I'm dug in on this, he said. I know I can take them on. He had already seen criticism. Everybody's coming to me to say, you can't do this. Isn't it going to show a rift? I said, what do you mean a rift? It's better to get out now. And guys, those of you who have followed me for a long time, just permit me to make a little joke here, right here, if you're looking on screen. So I'm a populist nationalist. I'm dug in on this. Get it? Dug in, dug in. I'm dug in on this. Okay, thanks for letting me crack that little joke. So what do you mean a rift? It's better to get out now. To Mr. Bannon, the chasm went deeper than some small bore spat about visas. These people are techno-feudalists, and it's a dangerous, dangerous thing, he said. Here's what I'm glad about. It's going to be the populist nationalist movement that'll take them on and break them. Because quite frankly, the established order is too gutless. The established order will go with anything that keeps their privileges. This disconnect between MAGA and the tech right has deep philosophical roots. And guys, let me just repeat that one of the aims of this channel, especially in the last several months, again, except for that period where I was posting for personal reasons, it has been designed to try to get you to the philosophical roots of this debate. And that's why you can see Curtis Yarvin, J.D. Vance, Peter Thiel, videos on Elon Musk, Plato, Aristotle, Nietzsche, Heidegger, Dugin, everything from A to Z that helps you to understand the philosophical dimensions of this debate. So you should know that Steve Bannon has some interest in traditionalist authors, which you can read about in the book War for Eternity. And you should have some sense of the relationship of the traditionalist authors and their attitude towards technology, particular technology as the dominant spirit of modernity. Because for the traditionalists, modernity is somehow the enemy, or modernity is a negative thing. If it's primarily characterized by scientific rationality and technology, then you begin to see the picture forming. If these are your philosophical sources, these are likely to be your political positions. Not necessarily one-to-one correspondence, but enough to give you some way of navigating these divides. So to repeat, the disconnect between MAGA and the tech right has deep philosophical roots. The political theorist Patrick Deneen, in his book Regime Change, makes a point about the American right that has been plainly true for decades, that for most of modern history, it has not actually been a conservative movement. He calls Republicans of the Liz Cheney or George W. Bush mold right liberals, and argues that their unwavering support for a free market, ideally unhindered by regulation and political limits, frequently resulted in economic disruptions and dizzying change that undermined the stability of the very social institutions that conservatives claimed to prize. So to interject here, they weren't conservatives, they were right-wing liberals. So a very important essay I've written that I think will help you to understand some things is called The Virtues of Right-Wing Anti-Liberalism. Because if you start to see mainstream conservatism as right-wing liberalism, then it becomes very, very important to conceptualize correctly right-wing anti-liberalism, okay, which is why I wrote that essay. In a widely read 2022 essay titled Why Conservatism Failed, a young Catholic University of America assistant professor named Jonathan Asconas sharpened this point. He described how the old Republican Guard failed to account for the power of technology as they claimed to be standing for the American flag and family. When you descend from lofty rhetoric about traditions and values, he wrote, a huge number of the actual practices and social institutions which built those values have disintegrated, not because of progressivism or socialism, but because of the new environment and political economy generated by technology. So in other words, you can't be a conservative who talks about tradition and we're going to conserve and the old way of life without factoring in the significance of technology. You can't be technologically illiterate. You have to factor in technology. So all the best thinkers did that. Heidegger reflected on the essence of technology. Leo Strauss reflected on the significance of technology for political community. Alexander Dugin thinks about technology, even though he writes as a traditionalist, anti-modern, and yet postmodern thinker on the right, even incorporating elements of the left. So you can't just be like, oh yeah, you have to think deeply about the essence of technology. That's why another reason why I think it's extremely significant, even before I had read the book, that Alex Karp of Palantir's book was titled The Technological Republic. To my mind, if you know that, for example, Karp did his schooling in Germany in the social sciences, and he's considered to be he's by his colleagues like Joe Lonsdale, he's called the philosopher of the company. Then even without reading the book, a title like The Technological Republic, you should right away be thinking, okay, you've got The Republic by Plato. So you're going to have reflection on the nature of political life that incorporates the dimension of technology very explicitly, which is in effect what you do get in that book in some sense. So yeah, you cannot ignore the meaning of technology. So back to the essay. When I spoke to Mr. Carl, the former Trump administration official, he brought up an infamous interjection into the visa debate by Vivek Ramaswamy, who wrote a very long post on X in December describing an American culture that has venerated mediocrity over excellence for way too long and extolling nerdiness. A culture that celebrates the prom queen over the math Olympiad champ, he said, or the jock over the valedictorian, will not produce the best engineers. The response was savage, Everything he posted in the days afterward continued to be flooded with vitriolic and often racist mockery, bringing back up the H-1B debate and coloring him as an enemy of the movement. And I'll just add, this continues. If you look up Vivek today, I think he announced that he's running for governor of Ohio, and you'll see that all kinds of people are piling on to him, piling on against him, and for what he said during that H-1B visa debate, partially for what he said. Mr. Carl is the author of a book called The Unprotected Class: How Anti-White Racism is Tearing America Apart. So it's pretty obvious which side he falls on in these debates. But he's intent on keeping the coalition together. That post was silly, he told me. Even so, he didn't think Mr. Musk or Mr. Ramaswamy should be viewed as enemies. The thing about Elon, Mr. Carl said, is that it's not really clear what he thinks. Mr. Musk had defended the H-1B program by arguing that America needed to attract the top roughly 0.1% of engineering talent. But he had also just waded into politics in Britain and Germany, where he'd promoted parties like the more or less openly ethno-nationalist Alternative for Germany. So that would seem to contradict what it looked like he was saying in the immigration debate here, Mr. Carl said. It might be that he kind of picked this fight as a way of showing he has complex views. On the flip side, some people have ended up finding a place in this new counter-establishment without even being necessarily conservative. We're all really trying for the same basic American dream sorts of things, said Julie Fredrickson, a venture capitalist who backs crypto startups. A friend of Mr. Carl's, she is also a kindred spirit with prominent figures on the tech right. Ms. Fredrickson describes herself as a liberal, but she's grown increasingly frustrated by a federal government that she believes acts almost like a moat, preserving the power of huge established interests over both smaller businesses and technological innovation, big banks over crypto, giant inefficient defense contractors over the new military tech startups emerging in Southern California, oil and gas production over companies like a small-scale nuclear startup she had just invested in. And in this passage, guys, I'll just add, you see sort of the flip side thesis, right? So little tech, crypto, military tech startups, small scale nuclear startups, right? So on one hand, the big banks, inefficient defense contractors, oil and gas. No, those things aren't necessarily going to go away, but the question is the opposite thing going to increase? And, you see the Trump meme coin, some of the companies that I mentioned, Palantir, Anduril, and so on, Shield AI, and you get a sense that, military tech startups are going to have their moment, and the small scale nuclear startups are going to have their moment. So very, very interesting set of influences and trends here at play. So back to the article. To her, meaning to Ms. Fredrickson, the H-1B issue was just another example of the basic problem that had driven the tech right toward Mr. Trump. Small companies, she said, rarely manage to navigate the visa system. That's the area in which both MAGA and tech really agree, she said. The current system only helps the multinational consulting corporations that are using it. She was still leery of the anti-immigrant talk that emerged in the debates. We should want the 1% minds, she said, and I mean that partially from a security state perspective because I'm terrified by the prospect of China winning on that. I do actually think that, I want to win is a stronger message than I want to do it only with people who look like me. She was voicing the twinned sense of possibility and frustration animating the tech right today. Can we just get back to winning? When I spoke to Mr. Bannon, he articulated a criticism of the tech world that perhaps surprisingly is one that at least some right-wing tech figures share. We haven't created anything on the technology side like the airplane or the internal combustion engine or the steam engine or anything big, he said. It's all been algorithms. Peter Thiel, who emerged in 2016 as the first prominent tech billionaire to back Mr. Trump, has described to me his view that technologies like social media or smartphones can offer an illusion of progress while offering dubious benefits, at best to the world at large. After Mr. Trump's first win, he led a quickly abandoned effort to begin dismantling the regulatory state. I just want to say something here really quickly. Two things. First one, again, about Peter Thiel. If you're interested, several videos on this channel going into Thiel's thought in detail. But about this point in particular, let me just restate it, right? So Thiel has described to me, the author, his view that technologies like social media or smartphones can offer an illusion of progress while offering dubious benefits. It's another one of the main points in the book called The Technological Republic, that Silicon Valley, which was originally born out of major national security related projects of world historical and civilizational significance, gradually withdrew into itself, shrank away from questions about the national good, in fact, shrank away from any really basic and fundamental why questions at all, and just started making trivial consumer gadgets without really thinking about whether that is what the best and brightest engineers in the country and in the world should be doing. And having lost track of an important sense of their civic duty, they started to do what I think Peter Thiel mentions here, do just things that are trivial in some sense. Yes, maybe they made people money. Yes, maybe they made your life a little bit more comfortable. Yes, maybe you got your pizza in 10 minutes instead of in 15 minutes, or whatever else, something was made faster and more efficient, but it wasn't connected to the fundamental pressing questions. And moreover, in the Technological Republic book, the argument is made that Silicon Valley companies, they forfeited their civic duty ultimately. Because, for example, when I'm slightly here beyond my area of expertise, actually, let's say I'm quite a bit beyond my area of expertise, but something along the lines that when the United States federal government needed the expertise of the tech companies for national security purposes. Now, I don't mean when they were pressuring them to censor speech. Let's leave that issue aside. But when they needed, for example, they needed some actual contribution on the tech side, Google engineers, they protested. They said, we oppose the militarization of this software. We don't want to work for the state. We want to make consumer gadgets and consumer products. And a very important government contract, I think it's called Project Maven, that Google was supposed to fulfill. They did not fulfill, again, because of the opposition of the engineers who didn't want to have anything to do with national security or military issues. And instead, if I understand correctly, that Maven contract was taken up by Palantir. Okay, Palantir, who's Alex Karp, co-authored this Technological Republic book. So that Silicon Valley, number one, has to start asking questions again about the good, about why we're doing things, about what we owe to the country, about the origins of the military technological relationship in the first place. All of those sorts of questions are reemerging in a fundamental way right now. Okay, these are the questions that are very much living questions now. Okay, so back here, right? So Peter Thiel, there were questions in 2016, but they're really amplified by 100-fold this time around. Okay, so after Mr. Trump's first win, Thiel, led a quickly abandoned effort to begin dismantling the regulatory state. But Mr. Thiel ended up largely sitting out of the 2024 election, skeptical that a second Trump administration could carry out a serious project to remake American governance. Now, Mr. Musk and Mr. Ramaswamy, Vivek, are leading a much higher profile effort through what they call the Department of Government Efficiency. Mr. Musk and Mr. Ramaswamy are both slightly comic public figures, prone to dopamine-addled mucking about in arguments on X. The outsized attention they draw can end up obscuring the complicated interplay between the imperatives of MAGA and the tech right. I think the tech right is going to win in the short term, said Rezi Khan, a geneticist and tech consultant who's friendly with many figures in both the MAGA and tech right spheres. As he saw it, the talent and money were mostly on the side of tech. The tech right is pro-American, he said, but it's pro-American in the sense that they see America as an empire that takes over the world and goes interplanetary. This was too rationalist of an approach for many on the MAGA side, which is shaped in large part by Christian faith, and at least for some, a belief that America should be a homeland for heritage Americans of Northern European extraction. They are not excited about the American empire, he said, or racing into space. They care more about the values of a pre-1960s America, the values of a Western civilization. Both sides see their path as the best approach to make America more dynamic. The MAGA intellectuals through a hoped-for refounding that would restore a sense of national identity and purpose, and the tech right through drawing the best talent from a worldwide pool and letting competition and capitalism rip. Mr. Trump himself has kept something like a kingly remove from the early squabbles of the aristocracy emerging in his shadow. His vice president, J.D. Vance, might be able to act as an intermediary between these rival wings. A former venture capitalist married to the daughter of Indian immigrants, he nonetheless adopted the populist nationalist style of politics. He probably leans more towards the populist, Mr. Khan said, but the dude cooks vegetarian food and hangs out with Indians all the time. Mr. Vance has a foot and many friends in both worlds, and a strong political interest in bridging the gap. I feel like he's the one that can keep the energy going and go between the two, Mr. Khan said, and I don't think either side will totally win. By the way, that would be a beautiful way of understanding Vance's symbolic significance, that he's actually the figure who is best positioned, and it's extremely significant that he was chosen as a VP because he's best positioned to sort of work as that conduit between, or the mediating factor between, the tech right and the MAGA right. Mr. Vance once told me that he thought something genuinely seriously bad was coming to America unless conservatives could assemble a coalition of populists and traditionalists that can actually overthrow the ruling class. The MAGA sphere has now managed to draw some of the richest people on earth into this project, with figures like Mr. Andreessen and Mr. Musk casting themselves as unlikely allies in a populist overthrow of the American elite. For now, some within Trump's orbit are happy to give them a chance, but others are already looking toward a struggle to decide who really holds the power as their revolution gets underway. It's time to have the debate, Mr. Bannon told me. You've got to hit them while you're strong. Okay, extremely, extremely interesting. Wouldn't you say so? So if you're looking for more background on this, again, check out the videos on this channel about the tech right, Trump and the tech right, JD Vance, Peter Thiel, Alex Karp, Mark Andreessen, Curtis Yarvin, and some of the other figures who can help you to think through this very fascinating, emerging, latent, maybe even more than, maybe it was once latent and now it's in full force, or at least you see the signs of what it might look like as it takes effect, a split between these factions. And maybe it's not even right to factionalize them in this way. We'd have to see. Again, it's bizarre. It's not straightforward in any one of these cases. Musk, even if you were the kind of person who thought that technology run amok is akin to, some sort of Luciferianism, Satanism, or dominance of the Antichrist, if you saw it in those sorts of terms, still though, as you go through the other side of the equation, what Musk did with X was hugely significant, wasn't it? What he did with Twitter was hugely significant. Don't you think so? I mean, didn't it play a very important role in allowing certain debates to come to light that were being suppressed? Hasn't he really taken a principled position against what was taking place with, government enforced tech censorship? I think you have to give everything its due. If you're going to credit Musk and his technological imperatives as negative, we also have to say, well, what has he done that's been positive? And I would think that what he's done for free speech with the Twitter acquisition and with other stances that he's taken have been, for this part of the political spectrum, largely positive. Wouldn't you say so? Nobody claims it's been perfect, but hasn't it been largely positive? Again, some things are almost unthinkable, that he came out in support of the AfD in Germany. Now that's pretty big. And that is not something that you could have expected a highly placed, extremely visible, a central and influential figure in American politics to have done. You have to remember where we were a couple of months ago, where we have been for the last few years. What world configuration is coming to an end? What has been the status quo? And just think about how far we've moved from that. And Musk has played a pretty significant role in moving us away from that. And he's not the only one. Some of these other figures that are mentioned in the piece, as for example, enemies of Bannon's, my personal opinion is that they too have contributed extraordinary, how could you put it? Whatever they may have been in the past, whoever they may have supported in the past, and however they may have thought about politics in the past, it's clear that for many of these people, the Biden administration just went so far that it truly forced a reorientation. Now, it does not seem to me in all cases to be a cynical ploy, like, we're just going to, you see where the bread is buttered, so we're going to become pro-Trump because we know that that's just where the wind is blowing and we're opportunists. If it wasn't Trump, then we'd be kissing somebody else's butt. In some of these cases, I think the evidence is pretty strong or compelling that for principled reasons, there has been a reorientation. And that makes sense because I think that's true for a lot of ordinary people who were pushed by democratic excess, by woke leftism, by their first and second graders being taught about pronouns and transgender people, and by many, many, many other such things. They were pushed away from the Democratic Party. They were pushed away from mainstream liberalism. They felt abandoned by a movement that had gone insane. And then they turned to a movement that's offering something less insane. That somehow, it's not rocket science. What Musk does is rocket science. Why people would support Musk is not rocket science. Biden gave Musk no credit. If you're entrepreneurial, if you're innovative, if you're enterprising, you don't like death by 1,000 regulations. You like to see new things being made and built, and many people do, all the way up and down the chain, from highly placed billionaires all the way down to your next door neighbor. They look at someone like Musk and he inspires them. Maybe he inspires their children. They want to learn about space travel, engineering, physics. And Biden gave him no credit. And worse than no credit, he put obstacles in his way. You could say he really was like denigrating him, demeaning him, and therefore denigrating and demeaning everybody who is inspired by him. And Trump, complete opposite. Not only are you acknowledged for your expertise is critical for the country, because a country will flourish depending on how it treats its geniuses, which is what Trump said. It's very important how you treat your geniuses. That's true. I think I would say, almost indisputable. So we had a period in our very recent past here where genius was attacked. Now we have a period where it looks like genius is going to be protected, encouraged, supported. My artistic friends on the right, publishers, sculptors, poets, painters, musicians, other people like myself who are drawn to philosophy primarily, or to religious thought, mystical thought. All of these people seem also, to my mind, just to give you a sense of the atmosphere, my personal anecdotal perspective on this, they also all feel liberated. We covered on this channel many, many times that the prevailing atmosphere, I think my most popular video on this channel is "Why is everything normal called fascist?" And you saw a million op-eds. Oh, beware if your sons start going to the gym. It probably means today they're going to the gym and tomorrow they're neo-Nazis. What? Today they're reading Aristotle and tomorrow they want to go around killing everybody. What are you talking about, right? That was the intellectual atmosphere, if you can call it that. That was the atmosphere in which intellect had been suffocating. Creativity had been suffocating. Every spark of life had been snuffed out. Well, you can't snuff out every spark of life, but you can try to. And it looks like the administration had been trying to. They wanted degrowth, depopulation, de-sanctification, de-spiritualization, demotivation, everything. It was going in the wrong direction. So now it shouldn't be surprising that all the people who felt suppressed now feel emboldened. Okay, what you're used to reading about is that, the people who feel suppressed and are emboldened, that's like, the people, the racists and the Hitlerites and the misogynists, your typical, let's say, Trudeau rhetoric, your typical Biden rhetoric, right? If we're talking about who have we been suppressing? Well, we've been suppressing the bad guys. And when Musk took over X, what did he liberate? He liberated the bad guys, right? Now you have just like hateful white nationalists who are allowed to post in public or something like that. But what they didn't see and what they didn't say, and what is indisputable, is that among those who had been suppressed and who now feel liberated are, in fact, talented, industrious, intelligent, enterprising, hardworking, patriotic people who they want to, not all of them, not every one of them thinks he's going to be a great man of history. Not everybody thinks they're going to be a world historical artistic figure, but they all want to contribute something to the life of the country. And not just in America, because this, Trump effect and Musk effect, it it works, it works everywhere. I have some Russian speaking friends and family. We talk about Musk in Russian. Okay, we talk about Trump in Russian. Everybody in the world is looking at these examples. Everybody in their countries is looking at these examples. And everybody from, again, the highest placed leader to the lowest placed foreign worker or a citizen of a country who sees these things can ask himself, do I want to live in a country that seems to be getting better? That seems to be fighting crime like El Salvador's Bukele? That seems to be creating prosperity? That seems to be, valorizing things that I consider to be good? Or do I want to live in a country where everything is getting worse and weird in a bad way? Okay, there's a good eccentricity, there's a bad eccentricity. So those are all kinds of things to consider. I think it would be a huge mistake to be too quick to judge at this point. If you're somebody who's looking at these factions on the right, I mean, there may be some that you consider whatever, okay? There may be others that you consider whatever. But it's, if it's true, like some commentators, intelligent commentators think that it is, that this second Trump win really represents the end of an era, okay? Like 2016 was a first little, it seemed like a false start or something. Biden seemed like it could be, what was Biden? It could have been the beginning of the Great Reset. Could have been, Trump was the anomaly. As it turns out, Biden was the anomaly. So we have this new moment, this new configuration, and it's so not self-evident how that's going to play out, what it looks like, how these groups are going to manage their relationships with one another. Is it true that we're now in an era where all of the insults and all of the standard operating procedures of the last 4 or 8 or 12 years, whatever last period we have just put an end to, apparently, it looks like and it feels like a lot of that is just completely now, no bullets in the chamber. So that's probably a bad analogy, but you know what I mean? Like much of it has lost its force. Like one of the X memes says, all of that was defeated at the ballot box. Now, there's a pendulum. These things swing and they might come back. But, Francis Fukuyama, not a big Trump supporter, he's writing, this seems to mark the end of global liberalism. Other liberals are analyzing it in the same sort of way. So it's not just the Trumpists who think that, this is a first turning or that this is the beginning of something completely new, some truly significant reconfiguration of the global moral, cultural, and intellectual order. It's possible that it is. It's interesting to think about it as though it is. And as I say, that's why it's interesting for us to have our finger on the pulse of these things. Now, I'm just going to mention something. I don't know if anybody's even watching this. We're 1 hour into the video. So I'll just say this for those of you who are here or who skip ahead this far. It's very helpful. I would recommend doing this. It's what I myself try to do. I have found it to be helpful. My students have found it to be helpful, to connect the two levels, the cultural, political, economic, daily. Okay, like this article, right? Trump is coming in. We have Bannon. We have Musk. We have this thing with the H-1B visas. That's like topical, today's news, cultural, political dimension. Yes, absolutely. And economic. That's very important. And as you see, even from this article, and as I try to show in almost all my videos, there's a deeper dimension. There's the philosophical dimension. Okay, there's Musk and the threat of transhumanism or posthumanism. There's Bannon and the traditionalists. There's Yarvin and Aristotelian political science. So try to operate at both of those levels. Do read the fundamental texts and supplement them with an understanding of contemporary affairs. Do study contemporary affairs and supplement them with a serious study of the foundational texts. Somehow, there are probably other things you could do and other ways that you can triangulate and do this sort of intellectual operation, but it's the one that I find most satisfying. It's the one that I try to do on this channel. Go back between those two levels. If you're just in the fundamental texts, if you could only pick one or the other, probably pick the fundamental texts, but I think you're going to get the most if you keep both of those in view, and if you allow yourself to ping pong between the two levels and try to understand how do they link together. Again, I'll give you one last simple example. In this book, which isn't even published yet publicly, The Technological Republic, co-written by Alex Karp of Palantir. Nice book. I recommend it. There's mention of Leo Strauss and his essay, What is Political Philosophy? Foundational, fundamental, crucial, beautiful, amazing, insightful. And these two things, they link together. That's the sweet spot if you can see where they link together. That'll help you understand the world, as well as the big questions, as well as yourselves, to the extent to which we can have self-knowledge. You know, the Oracle at Delphi said, know thyself, and thou shalt know the cosmos and the gods, whatever the exact phrase is. But self-knowledge is the goal here. It's elusive, it's difficult, but this is as fun and interesting and insightful a way as any to get at it. So guys, Michael Millerman, millermanschool.com. Thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe, comment, do whatever you'd like to do to help my work grow, this channel grow, so we can cover more videos like this in the future. Let me know what you think. Feel free to post articles as they come up that you'd like me to cover. Guys, take care, be well, enjoy whatever day it is when you're watching this. And if you happen to be watching it in the next day or two, enjoy the Trump inauguration and the Coronation Ball if you happen to be going. All right, guys, take care.